We're grateful to have all of you here today to hear from Mayor Wilson. We've got a very big bond proposal coming up on the ballot this fall, and we're all very much engaged in the challenges that come in public safety. So we're excited to hear about some of the details of the proposal today. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Lynn Ames. In a moment of weakness, Solutions Utah decided to ask me to be their board chair recently. I'm replacing Dale Keller. He and his wife are going off to actually serve a mission for a little while. I think in the Carolinas. They're going to go chase a hurricane out there, but they're not leaving for a little bit. So we're grateful to Dale. He's provided great service over a long period of time, has been involved with public health for many years in his professional career, and we're grateful for all that he's done. And I'm excited to have the opportunity to be involved in a group that I think is meaningful, and we hope to have a positive voice as we deal with challenges related to homelessness and public safety. And so we're excited today. We think this is a big part of all of that. We're especially grateful to Mayor Wilson for being willing to come down and speak to us today, and grateful for her public service. And we're going to have Tiffany introduce her in just a minute. I need to make sure we're covering everything. I want to express my gratitude to Brian Hill. Where's Brian? Brian's back here. He kind of runs Gateway and helped work with Kiln to facilitate this. And we're especially grateful to Kiln for providing this space for us today to have this meeting. We're going to give them just a minute so they can explain who they are. And following they're taking a couple of minutes, I'm going to turn the mic over to Tiffany Price, who will introduce the mayor, and from there we'll get the mayor going and hear what she has to say. So come on up. You can use. Okay.
Don't stand too close to you. Everybody, welcome to Kiln. Have you been here before? Would you raise your hand? Okay, about half the room. Well, welcome. Kiln is a co-working space. So we have about 55,000 square feet of co-working, everything from an individual up to a 55-person office. We also have lots of meeting rooms and this beautiful theater that we host events or offsites or board meetings, things like that. So if we can ever help you with anything, please come check out Kiln, and you can reach out to me or Meredith right there or any of my team up at the front desk. Welcome to Kiln. We're so grateful to partner with this event. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Mayor. Excited for today. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day. At Solutions Utah, when we saw this bond come around, we just thought we should have a small event to let Jenny, the mayor, produce or talk about it, tell us the benefits of it, and answer your questions. Because I think these bonds come along and sometimes we don't know what they're all about. And I know this group in particular is concerned with safety and security and the growth we're having come along and the natural infrastructure that we need to support our growth and provide more safety and security to our community, businesses, more services for the people in need. And so with that, I'd like to welcome Mayor Wilson. We've known each other for decades and been through many campaigns, county council. She's held many offices, helped run the Olympics, and I'm sure she'll be a part of the future Olympics, and currently up for election for county mayor again. So with that, I'll let Mayor Wilson take the stage. And sorry, I'm so used to calling her Jenny.
Jenny's great. Okay, can you guys hear me? Is this audio working? Great. Well, thank you. Thanks, Tiffany. Tiffany and I know each other from several walks of life, and she's been a dear friend for a lot of years. And I recognize many of you, and I know, for those who I don't know directly, that you've been working diligently and in a very committed manner on some of the challenges in our community. And we're all committed to solutions. And so I'm especially excited to have a chance to talk to you about this bond proposal because I think you're a very educated audience. So I'm going to actually, I appreciate the time actually, so we can get into some of those specifics, and then I will leave time for questions after. So the bond proposal, I think I probably just messed this up.
No, Mayor, sorry, we're rebooting.
Oh, okay. So indeed, we have a bond proposal for the public's consideration. It's a property tax bond. It's all drafted, things are settled, ballots have been printed. We don't think there's a court challenge. We think this is going to remain on the ballot. Are we going to switch over?
We're going to switch to this one.
It's a good idea. Reset.
Sorry.
Get this off. Pull this around. Do a little switcheroo. There we go. Okay. So these are the goals of the bond. Balancing public safety and human service needs, realigning our Salt Lake County Jail and our human services systems that we oversee at Salt Lake County. We want to realign them for a bigger, stronger impact. The bond creates will fund structured and secure environments to reduce repeat offenses, which is critical, and put people on a path towards self-reliance. And then as we did analysis, we identified with a lot of community input the need to fund a missing element of the broader system, which I'm going to talk about. And then the bond revenue will replace outdated infrastructure and treatment programs. So the Human Services, Homelessness, and Criminal Justice Action Plan, and the reason we have a slide on this is that the bond proposal is a subset of a much broader plan that Salt Lake County has developed. The plan has been reviewed and complemented by both sides of the aisle, including my council members, including the governor, including Mayor Mendenhall and others. It's comprehensive. This came about largely due to a lot of the conversations that business leaders are having in the community about impacts. And we also, with a very robust focus at Salt Lake County on human services, are always interested, as are you, in really getting a person on a path to success. And we know there are barriers in a system that is always changing. So the global plan is comprehensive, and the bond proposal will address just a subsection of the total cost and need. I will say that we are in a unique time. The convening of community members, the governor, Wayne Niederhauser and his staff, legislators, county elected, city electeds, and others. I think this is a moment where we are being and acting on the best of Utah by setting aside petty arguments and political differences and working together. That doesn't mean we've got down to every little nuanced detail perfectly aligned, but we are getting there. We have made progress, and we are deeply committed to a cooperative environment. And we all agree with the goal that homelessness should be brief, rare, and non-reoccurring. So Salt Lake County, we came together, we mapped systems, we broke down silos. I asked the DA and the sheriff to come, and then my housing people were working with human services people. We formed, I think, more than 10 to 12 work groups, and we continue to meet. In fact, we have an agenda tomorrow. And I will pull up my phone in a minute because we have some good news from Salt Lake County related to the work that we're doing on this plan. But we mapped we looked at the gaps in the system and the barriers through this process. And again, we continue to meet. The gaps and barriers, we identified through our point-in-time count and additional state and local data that we have an estimated 1,000 people living unsheltered in Salt Lake County at any given time. And they require various levels of attention, intervention, and support. We identified that 300 of the individuals, and we know these aren't perfect numbers, but we had to land somewhere, and I'm happy that we have identified a broad goal and are working towards it, and all the while we'll be adjusting the numbers over time. But 300 intensive people with intensive needs because they have probably a diagnosed deep mental health challenge, or undiagnosed, but we've seen it, we know it. People who, another 300 who do need mental health support, but maybe they just need some medication support and really with some attention can be put on a better path. And then what have identified that there are 400 people on the street that just need a place to be. And they need limited amount of services, maybe some socialization, but maybe not as an intensive an environment with, and frankly less costly the more you move from the intensive to the light. And then our criminal justice and law enforcement challenges. We know that the drug crisis is getting worse by the minute, and we're well aware at Salt Lake County and leaning in a lot of ways, not just through this plan at addressing that. And unfortunately, our jail is the largest mental health and substance use treatment facility in the county, and that we recognize that has to change. So the daily cost per inmate is $136. 25% of inmates are unhoused, and 1,200 unstably housed on probation and pretrial, meaning they're out, but there's the 1,200 people who maybe couch surfing, may be in an okay place temporarily, but really need more secure housing. So there are systemic gaps you're aware of. I will tell you, with so much going on, with funding partners, including people in this room, I always worry about funding. What I worry more about right now is workforce. And my staff hears it every day. Like, what are we doing to expand capacity? What is the U doing? What is SLIC doing? What is the state doing? A lot, but we need to do more, because when you look at the expansion that I'm going to roll out, we know that we need more trained individuals from the corrections side, more CIT training, which is a police officer who has a comprehensive understanding of mental health too, so that they're responding appropriately to get people on the right path. And then, so workforce, that's a biggie. And then health and wellness care. Every one of you has experienced people living on the street, and if you were to describe your interaction, you would probably share that there isn't just a substance use or mental health challenge with the individual, there's a health challenge. It could be just an unsanitary challenge, or challenges from living in unsanitary environments, to issues with frostbite if it's winter, heat stroke, and everything in between. People living on the streets have the 4-state clinic, thank goodness, but often people aren't receiving the ongoing care that they need, and that's quite obvious, I think, to all of us. We've already touched on the mental services challenges, and then we also, and I want to just take a second for this audience on that. When Medicaid expanded, it was a big win for our community, and what we saw was a lot of substance use disorder beds opening in our county. What we didn't see enough of are mental health beds, and what we have very, very few of are beds specifically and program providers specifically for that co-occurring challenge. And I actually met with, giving this presentation yesterday, with some police officers in leadership in the county, and they really emphasize this. Like, you bring somebody in on substance use disorder when really there's this underlying mental health concern. And I always share, like, I think we all have friends and family, sadly, who maybe would qualify for one of those beds. I do too. I have a relative, and I don't know if his challenge is that youth's too young, or I'm starting to believe as the years go on, and luckily he's still alive, but I start to believe that it was actually a mental health underlying challenge, and then he could never kick the addiction challenges due to that. So we have to understand that, and we have to invest in that. Data. Like, go back to 1,000. You're all probably saying that's too low. We need better data systems, and we have done a lot of work. Catherine Fife is here, one of my associate deputy mayors. She and I went to a working retreat and learned a lot about some counties' ability to do a better job in case management, meaning that your data will inform you one person to the next on, whether or not they're currently in the shelter that night, or they were able to land a Section 8 voucher and they're ending up in housing. What's their mental health condition? Are they seeing their doctor? There's a lot of privacy issues around that. And I always push back. I'm like, find me that attorney who knows everything about HIPAA, because I'm sick of that dirty word. It's keeping us from doing anything. But at the same time, I also value privacy, and so do you. So we have to find that right balance in terms of data for case management. And then we need better, more comprehensive data as it relates to those of us in the policymaking space, the business community. Tiffany's the best at this, challenging data and really pushing. She's laughing. Sometimes appreciated. Sometimes it's like, Tiff, we got to move on. But we're asking the right questions in those settings. What do we, let's really understand data from a public perspective. And it's funny because my theory is, and we're working on this, I think the data's out there. It's just so diffused that it's not usable for us all. And frankly, we need to do better at even a common vocabulary on what certain things mean, right? Because I've seen a definition create a lot of setbacks as we've come towards building solutions when I believe we're all on the same page. So the action plan, again, we haven't gotten to the bond, but this is expanding the housing I mentioned, more focus on enforcement and criminal justice reform. We could have a session here all day on that. It's important, and there's so much there. I mentioned the gaps. In a minute, I'm going to talk about a big element to the broader plan, which is related to the bond, and that's building what we're calling a Justice and Accountability Center, and then expanding and improving the county's jail mental health access. The DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, these are the people breaking down cartels. These aren't the people that are going to work with local law enforcement necessarily on a low-level offender. These are the people who get the bad guys. And the federal government funds a lot of what they do, but what they don't fund are the people on the ground. So we need to approach that from a countywide perspective. When the Unified Police Agency, which was several cities and continues to be in a different form, it changed, it morphed. The sheriff is now pulling back her own duties to the county. But in that process, they lost 2 officers for DEA. And when I learned of that, I immediately worked with the sheriff and said, look, let's ask our county council to use some of our opioid settlement funds to fund the 2 that we're losing. So we did, we funded them. We're gonna continue to fund them at least for several years. Those funds don't continue into perpetuity, so I have to be somewhat careful, but we've committed to a few years. But our plan is to add more. I think 10 more is the 5-year plan. We need more we need more people on the ground, and that will draw down federal resources. So we're in the process of kind of figuring out where is the ceiling on what we can get federally. We may go to the state and ask for support there, but we can use some of our settlement dollars and are committed to that. Okay, now to the bond. It addresses the gaps that I mentioned. This is the broader plan. The 2 things the bond does specifically are fund the capital cost of building a Justice and Accountability Center, and improves and expands our jail beds and our mental health unit. So the public safety bond, assuming this passes, and I'm going to be more than glass half full, and don't ask me what happens the next day if this doesn't, but the Justice and Accountability Center, this is something that is the missing element of the system that I mentioned. It is intended to be about 300 beds, and it's a place that we can take low-level offenders. And that's the piece missing. I know people here who have been passionate about some of the challenges in Salt Lake City. What is happening now by any police agency They come across someone, they have to figure out, is this somebody I can get into services? They run a background check. If there's enough of a threshold that they can legally do that, right? There's some restraint there. But they're kind of faced with a choice if there isn't an obvious place for someone, and there is a crime being committed, and that means even for low-level offenders, take them to the Salt Lake County Jail. Now, depending on the situation, that can be a good thing. The gentleman who runs our jail is saying, look, we want them there for 48 hours at least to detox, to settle down, to get them out on the best path. But the judges are weighing in too and may release. There is overcrowding at our jail based on our capacity and our staffing. And then additionally, I don't think anyone here wants somebody who is basically a minor offender, nonviolent, to be in the jail for a long time. It doesn't get them better. So this is intended to be a place with human services support, a lot of housing and other service providers there to provide assistance, but also an area where the word accountability matters. My own family member I mentioned, his most direct relative who cares for him is like, please, like, check him in, right? There is a level of accountability. And even as somebody who has loved working in human services in my life, understands that accountability matters, right? You might say, oh, well, the left thinks this and the right thinks that. Oh no, we've all come together and we agree we should not over-criminalize, but people had to be held accountable. So this is a lighter jail with more support and is intended for nonviolent offenders and people creating nuisance crimes and such. And then one of the other, as I look at the jail and the mental health unit, and I can't remember if there's a slide on this. I'm gonna go ahead, yes, there is. So I'm gonna get to that in a minute. I've already mentioned caseworkers, job training, mental health, connection to housing options, stabilization. And this is cheaper. So if we put people in and we're not doing the catch and release, that can be frustrating, not always, but sometimes. But you know, we're looking at $75 a day, and that is 60 days less than jail. And we can also, depending how this is, and we're still working on the structure, we've got to work to make sure this is Medicaid eligible. So we also want it to be a corrections facility. So we're finessing through that, trying to figure it out. And upon the passage of the bond, we're gonna need to build, and we're gonna be planning while we're planning to build. So we have a window to refine this better. And then also, big element of this plan is combining 2 county jails into one. We have some operational challenges, spending tax dollars not as efficiently as I would like to run both operations at Oxbow and the ADC. So the main facility will be remodeled, expanded, the sale of the Oxbow jail property to capture some revenue. And then our general population, we plan to increase beds, address future growth and need. And we haven't put a major investment into the jail for 20 some odd years, and things are aging. Mental health unit. Right now, the sheriff will tell you the people in our jail are more seriously mentally challenged, have mental health challenges beyond previous years. People are, due to drug use, the expanding nature of that, and fentanyl and other really horrible drugs on the street, we're seeing people far more challenged in this space. So we need more mental health beds. This additional element of our plan is really key, a community reentry step down. So I've talked about the JAC, but additionally we're talking about 100 beds within the jail. So as somebody gets closer to release, they can be moved to one of these 100 step down beds and get more services there. So we're no longer just pushing them out onto the street. We do have a relatively new program to get people services as they exit the jail, but it's upon their release, and it's optional. We have done a great job with this program to give people access to court information. I've witnessed it several times that people love to get that information as they leave. They might need their cell phone charged. Clothes, if you've been booked in the summer and you're released in the winter, you don't want to send somebody out in shorts and a t-shirt. So there's a lot of things we're doing with that. This is far more comprehensive, would be part of the sentencing window and provide some direct support before people are let out. And so all in all, when you look at moving those Oxbow jails over, the expansion I'm talking about, more mental health beds, the 100 step down, our newly constructed bed total is 812, which is a big expansion. Necessary for so many reasons, but also necessary just due to our population growth. These are some quick Q&As. I won't take too much time on these, but they're available to you. And then the punchline, how much is this going to cost? The total cost is $607 million, but we have $100 million set aside. We've known for a few years that this was in the works. So we set aside some of the federal money provided during the COVID era to knowing that we wanted to reduce the cost to the taxpayer. So maintenance and improvements, $90 million, the expansion improvements, $427, the capital cost of building the JAC, $100, capture some, this is estimated for demolition and sale, or set aside, that the bond question is $507. So the average property value, I could now go on for an hour about our housing crisis, which I won't, but unfortunately the average property valuation in this county right now is over $600,000. That in itself is shocking. But if you break that down, that cost down, the annual cost per resident is $59, to a business $107. Per month, that's under $5 and under $9. We think the public is going to pay for this either way. And some have asked, how are you going to fund the operations? And we do have a plan to do so. But we're going to have to pay with your property tax dollar for general funding if this doesn't pass anyway, because for the very reasons that you all experience on a regular basis. So for the average property value, $5 a month is, to me, far more than worth the investment. I don't think I'm supposed to say that because I can't advocate, so don't tell anyone. I'm supposed to educate today. So bond language and this is I think the actual language broken down to 4 sections. Shall we issue those bonds for 21 years? Here's the purpose, and we need to live with this purpose. There's some things that we can measure and shift a little bit, but we will, should this pass, be required to acquire, construct the JAC, primarily for people who have had multiple encounters with law enforcement and who need a supervised and structured environment with resources to reduce repeat offenses, including for mental health, substance use treatment, job-related connection to housing. Combine 2 county jails into 1, increasing capacity, expand a mental health unit, a transitional unit, and then the capital maintenance I mentioned, and then the last section is required. It's just sort of legalese. So that's the presentation. I'm hoping that I've convinced you by educating you. I really believe, as I believe you believe, that our capacity and that JAC especially will be incredibly useful to the very people that are causing some chaos in our community, who need accountability, but more importantly, need to be put on a path to success. And I've lost track of time, so I don't know how much time I have for questions.
I think we're good, and if we have questions.
Okay, thank you. All right, Phil.
Just for clarification, the 300 mental health beds, is that included in the jail as part of this 800?
Yes, so the 800 expansion is the additional mental health and special unit beds. I haven't really talked about that, but often the jail needs to address somebody's particular needs uniquely, and so they have a different system compared to a traditional mental health unit or beds, or a traditional management of a pod or what have you. So I think it's about 150, and Brad just stepped out. I think it's 150 total new mental health beds as part of that 800. And then that 800 number also includes the 100 step-down beds as well. And then we additionally, the JAC is a separate 300. What's that? Yeah, good question. So the JAC is intended to be close proximity to the jail, but not at the jail. So, and it will operate differently than a traditional corrections environment with more human services support. So we're working on the modeling of exactly how that's going to work. We have looked at a couple of different models. We went to Washington County, Oregon, which is a suburban area about 45 minutes outside of Portland. And they actually have a setting very similar, a lot of direct case managers. The case managers have maybe 13, I think was average number of people under their management. And it's interesting because there aren't any bars in this jail. It's directly tied to their traditional jail. But people are told, look, these are the rules. You have to abide by these rules. Once they've been there long and without bars, and they do, they're compliant. If they're not, they get sent to the traditional jail. So there's incentive to have beyond people's best behavior. There's also the support on site. And after people have been there and settled in for a couple of weeks, they're actually able to go to work if they're stable. And then they have a basic drug screening when they come back and some other questions to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing with the plan. Again, they have that supervision directly with an individual that holds them accountable. They're very happy with the operations there. They're seeing success. Their recidivism is lowered, but there is the threat of the other jail. So we don't want the JAC to be on site. We want it to be an incentive for people to serve in this space. Judges, our hope when we work through the 18-month window of planning, will be empowered to take a low-level offender and sentence them to the JAC versus the jail. That's the plan and goal, and we're working on the outreach on that. So, Sheila.
I just have a question about, is it the same kind of impact to their criminal record if they go into the JAC versus the traditional?
Yeah, and that's to be determined. We really believe, and I don't want to speak for the governor or Mayor Mendenhall or the other mayors in the Valley or any of you, but we believe strongly at Salt Lake County this investment is a stabilization of many other systems. So we've been in conversations with judges and legislators and educating them about this and getting an incredibly favorable response. But the next step is literally to work on that. Like, how do we get the judicial system to conform to this investment? And we'll have a couple of 18 months to 2 years. We're going to have a planning window to work through these very issues. And then, so we'll be, and interestingly, not to go down too much of a rabbit hole, but I did spend time with a police officer for an hour who is CIT certified, so he knows how to work. He worked with West Valley's system. And he said, look, you've got to approach the city courts, our lower level courts, not just the district courts, because those judges and those systems are most often dealing with domestic violence offenses that are, no domestic violence offense, in my opinion, is light, but less than maybe a district court offense. Or, when you look at some of the nuisance crimes, those are going to land not in a district court. So we have to go out and work very directly. The next step is to start forming work committees. We've had a lot of subject experts who have looked at this, they're supporting it, and they're really interested in the next step, first of the year, as we drill down on perfecting this process. And so we'll be working with the judges to work through that. And it might need legislative support a year from now as we look at how to incentivize that change. Yes?
You had mentioned that 48 hours is, the detox period, and
Oh boy, I'd have to phone a friend, Matt DeMont. He's been so good at this. So let me see. I don't know the exact stats, and if any of my staff do, jump in. But we tend to see both, right? You see, what the sheriff will tell you is the jail has now moved towards people who are sentenced for a longer period of time are committing some pretty egregious crimes. There are limitations to the jail, and we do see both often due to overcrowding release for certain offenses. There's certain offenses that are not eligible for overcrowding release, but we do see a day or two and people are out, and often we're hearing that judges are frustrated with the gaps in the system and how things are going, and are often not wanting a client or somebody who is being charged to be in the jail, and they'll send them to through a process that we run at Salt Lake County, and that's the Keeley shop, the pre-trial, but also our criminal justice services. That's what I was trying to remember. And that's a group of, it's a very robust element of Salt Lake County government where we provide the support of the person through the system who's actually been released. So it's pre-trial, but it's also some support around the pre-trial process.
I was just wondering because you talked about the work training programs and stuff, and so I was wondering, does that take place while they're in jail, or is that kind of out inmate kind of training?
It'll be both, because right now our criminal justice services do exactly that. Our workforce services do that as well. But this model, this plan, will have both workforce support in those 100 units before you're released, or if you're committed, and that could be somebody with a felony who's maybe spending several months, and then the last couple weeks, say, and don't quote me on that because it will change depending on the crime and the situation, but a few weeks in one of those 100 beds before they're let out, whereas the JAC's intended for lower level offenders, and the support will be over there as well.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
We own a business in the county, and our interaction with the homeless population is basically mostly with the criminal element. And I would say we've probably been hit at least over a dozen times, anywhere from petty theft all the way to a criminal holding the knife to an employee's throat. My question is, I see how we do need more beds, and we do need some beds for mental health. But is there some coordination to not allow the drug addicted to be released? You know, from our experience, the criminals that have basically stolen or caused the problems they're just addicted to drugs, and they're just pillaging to feed their habit, all the way to finding needles and heroin,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. Is there a provision to not allowing the drug addicted to leave the jail? Like, is it?
No. I think that and this is probably a question more for the criminal justice experts, but for my kind of generalist understanding, that if you're charged with possession, you may not even spend a night in jail, depending on the severity and the situation. In your situation, I'm sorry that you've gone through that as business owners. It's horrific, and I can't imagine. And thank you for doing what you do to serve the community and your family for what you do, because it's not okay. So just know that I get that. But, distribution, and then all the way up to the cartels, right? If you're running a cartel, let's hope you're quick sentencing and you're out to the prison for an extended period of time, all the way down. And I think that what we're seeing is that you've got to get people into appropriate programs, give them hope, and get them to break habits. So I don't know that the jail, and the good news about the JAC as proposed is we're talking weeks. This isn't a facility that's intended to be like 2 days. This is intended to allow that stabilization and that expansion, and the expansion of the system as a whole. And the goal, the North Star in all of this is to get somebody to the proper treatment program when they're released. So the criminal acts you've described should be longer term, and we should keep people and hold them accountable appropriately. But the use itself, most of what I've seen, and again, I'm a generalist who's learned along the way, and I love what I do. But I would probably fall into being educated by my substance abuse disorder team, and they're like, you gotta find the right, you gotta have that accountability, but then you gotta get people into a nurturing environment to deal with whatever it's leading to their long-term use, right? Again, the criminal element should be held accountable. I mean, the theft, the public nuisance, all of that, those are crimes, and we have to jail people for those.
Mayor, and I think a lot of our business community too sees this as a problem. And to me, when I see the bond and the solution is kind of the jack, because the people who are committing these low-level crimes, because the jail has these high-level crimes, there's nowhere for them to go that is a break. Is that how you see jack?
Yes.
Because a lot of these businesses, they're paying their rent, they're trying to keep employees happy, and they kind of want to see that middle section that is committing the thefts, the robbery, that just going up to your
Yeah.
customer and harassing them, that makes that customer not want to come back. Will Jack help in that way?
Absolutely. So the goal is, just take one of your horrible incidents that have happened to you, depending on the situation. If the officer arrives and there's a quick screen or whatever they can do legally to figure out, if they have evidence to do the screening to look at previous crimes or what have you, and it's the person hasn't had any violent offenses, they're actually using, not distributing, that's a jack situation. If it's somebody who's actually broken windows or threatened or what have you, that's straight to the traditional jail bed. If there's somebody who happens to be a victim in that same, whether it's a few people on the street or whatever, that's a person that we can immediately move to one of these new housing, one of the 1,000 new units with mental health support and substance use disorder help. So this is a very aggressive expansion of the system with the goal of having the right path depending on the individual and their needs. Yeah.
So in your presentation, you said there's between 1,000 and 1,200 people that you're estimating are out of the streets and have some sort of problem, whether it's homelessness, drugs, mental, whatnot. You're proposing to have a bond for 815 bed expansion. What happens to the other 12 to 500 to 400, 500, 600 people that are not?
Brad, does our count, does 815 include the jack or not? I can't remember. It does. Okay, so, yes. So, right. So the jail bed expansion outside of the jack are 515, I think, just over 500. The jack is 300, thereabouts. And then we're committed to working with partners in the community on building 1,000 additional units with wraparound services for people in crisis who are non-criminal offenders. So 1,000 new for general population, and then you've got the 800, 500 at the jail expansion, 300 with Jack. So it is a significant expansion. So, yeah, and then I'll go to you.
Sorry, just want to understand.
Would you hold 1 second? She's just got a quick follow-up, and then I'll.
Yeah, so what percentage of this population do you see recovering? Because that's the population that these beds are supposed to help, right? My understanding is that once you're hooked on drugs, you're not ever going to recover. Like you're going to be, I don't know, is it like less than 5% recovery rate?
I cannot give you, and maybe my human services people have a stat. We know that investment, sadly, not everyone gets on a perfect path. It's a reality. But I want to just quickly tell you the story of Destiny Garcia, who inspires me every day. When my predecessor, Ben McAdams, was involved in the creation of the scattered new resource center model, he was part of Operation Rio Grande. He came across a woman, got to know her on the street. She was given the choice, or he got to know her later. She was given the choice when they picked her up, go to treatment or go to jail. She chose treatment. 6 months later, she was working in his office as the constituent liaison receptionist for the mayor's office. She was trying to reconnect with her older child who was not happy with how she had behaved on the street. She had been addicted on the street and homeless and neglected her family. Destiny's gone on. She was promoted under my office after a little bit, and she is now the executive director of Clean Slate, which is the organization working to change criminal records for minor offenses so that people don't have to carry the burden after they have recovered. So I would just encourage you to reach out to her. She knows more about recovery than anyone, and she is a success story. And I think I choose to be with hopefully all of you glass half full. If you get people, accountability is important, I believe that, but resources and support, sadly, we're not gonna, this is a bad problem in our nation and our world, it really is. I'm not naive enough to think we're gonna have 100% success rate, but if we don't invest, we're gonna see more of a churn, we're gonna see more impact on the streets, and I start to get into, there's a lot of narratives like, we don't wanna be this city or that, and I don't like to vilify cities because I know those elected officials and I know how hard they're working. Every community has a different challenge, so I'm not going to name any cities, but I will tell you, we love this community. I love this downtown. I grew up with this downtown. We've got to double down to fight for every last person and do what we can. So, and I'll take your question now.
Maybe 67. How do you see services for an aging, basically an orphan elderly population has been impacted in this model?
That's interesting, isn't it? Well, we generally have an aging population. So you would generally think there'd be a disproportionate, but the fact that it's that top heavy is concerning. So that's a great education. I bet the people working in those resource centers understand that better than I, but I wasn't aware of that. So I think, we at Salt Lake County, we oversee aging services, so the programs that we have in our senior centers and the Meals on Wheels program, those are all Salt Lake County. But I think what you're probably suggesting is that we involve our aging services people as we look at this expansion. I didn't know that, so thank you for educating me. Yeah, that's good information. Thank you. And maybe it's additional investment in a location in the future for shelter that is more specific to that population. So, Soren. Oh, okay.
Could you talk a little bit about how you anticipate this working on the city campus with the Huntsman Mental Health Facility?
Oh, good question. I didn't bring up the Huntsman Mental Health, or the Huntsman Receiving Center. It's the Kem and Carolyn Gardner / I asked Kem yesterday, I don't even, but it's the Receiving Center. So that will open in March, I believe. I hope we're still on track. And it is game-changing. It's another critical element, a gap in our system that needed to be filled. So we will have the former uni, which is now Huntsman Mental Health, on site. And I always forget the bed counts. Catherine, help me out. How many for the main? I feel like 40 on the main level. Yeah, right now we're in Bridge up at up at Huntsman, where right now Salt Lake's police officers can take somebody off the street who's having a mental health crisis and take them up there at this moment. They have 12 beds. That's going to expand to, I think, 40 near the jail property on 33rd. So that facility will allow the problem to be unpacked by people who can prescribe drugs, who have the education. These are psychiatrists and social workers on site to manage that population. And we'll be able to immediately treat a lot more people and get them what they need on the spot. And they're able to stay there for 48 hours. When they hit 48 hours, our hope is they're stabilized and we can move them to treatment or detox, and there's a different relationship with detox. I think they could move immediately to VOA for detox. But after 48 hours, if the person is still facing a crisis, the Salt Lake County and actually Chem Gardner helped fund an additional floor. When this was in concept, we were asked to consider by Huntsman to add capacity and add another floor. You can actually check out of the beds below, and this is how the federal government will pay for some of the services, into a longer term stay on site. It's fewer beds, but that's going to allow for people who need more mental health stabilization. The goal will be, if somebody moves to that second tier, but by that point, this isn't somebody who should be in the jail. This is a general community member in crisis. That individual could go to some support services, supportive housing, or if they need additional support through mental health care, what have you, we will have addressed that. And so I see it sort of as a mothership for like unpacking a lot of the problems we're seeing in the county with this population. So I'll get to you next, but let me get to Soren.
Three quick thoughts, kind of in context of what's going on here, and I'd love to get your response. First of all, South Salt Lake bears a huge burden of criminal justice facilities, homeless facilities, and a lot of things. I understand that this accountability center is being contemplated in South Salt Lake, which, again, smallest population of any city in the county, and also the lowest per capita income. There's a lot of challenge in Salt Lake City, so I really applaud this kind of system thinking about revamping the whole system. It may give us an opportunity to think about other locations other than South Salt Lake. I'll mention in the context, because many of you know the work that I do around the Jordan River. This is a location that has been challenging us for 50 years because of a lot of things that are encompassed within the criminal justice facilities, the homeless facilities that are now there, the Pamela Atkinson Center. And we are working hard to rethink what the area around the Jordan River looks like. And having criminal justice and homeless facilities near the Jordan River, I think will continue to be problematic if that's the location. I've heard some rumblings that the Oxbow may be contemplated as a new non-congregate shelter. I think that would be a colossal failure if that's where that is located. We're trying to change the thinking around the Jordan River as being the back of everything, the back of industry, the back of yards, the back of all of these institutional facilities, and make it the front, the center of community and culture. So we need to rethink while we're working on these facilities around the Jordan River, think about the environment of what the Jordan River can be, and remember that vision. The last one I'll mention is that I know the idea of a campus is really popular. We've seen really great success stories in places like San Antonio, their haven of hope. San Antonio metro area is about the same as Salt Lake, Davis, and Utah counties combined. They have 80% of the population in one city, and there's a lot of levers you can pull at local government when you have large systemic things you can do. In that same area of population, we have probably 50 municipalities. The 3 largest cities in the state are in Salt Lake County. And so thinking about these kinds of facilities as campuses is problematic, especially for a community like South Salt Lake. We ought to have Utah, Salt Lake, and Davis County all in a single continuum of care. They're all in 3 separate continuum of care council working in silos because of jurisdictional boundaries and the really decentralized local government structures that we have here. So if you have a response to any of those, I'd love to hear it. I'm just planting seeds because that's what I do on the river.
Yeah.
And I'm a systems thinker and I want to plant some of those seeds as well.
Well, I could take a half hour to answer that one. First of all, South Salt Lake, yes, you're right. In fact, Mayor Wood brought me the map and showed me how overt, there were parcels that I didn't realize were non-taxable in her city. I just pay attention to mine, the counties, and UTA, the state, us, like they're a city, and I know for a fact, because I was with Tiffany, with the Senate President and others, I think the legislature's starting to understand that. I'm not going to speak to the campus model. I actually am not on the state homelessness board anymore. The modification eliminated an administrative arm of the county from serving on that board. I think that's an oversight. So our staff does their best to stay up with it, but we have a legislator serving, a great one, but my day in and day out voice is not on that board. So doesn't mean I don't talk to Wayne every day, or not every day, but once a week about whatever, and I get it. But I see this bond, and I care very much about what happens that day. This is a stabilization in the system that allows us to meet with the state homelessness board next day and say, how now, given we're going to fund this and the bond language says we need to, what more in our urban center in my county does the state need to support? And then I'll go up, we'll have some time to advocate to the legislative session. I'm agnostic at this moment. I'm not agnostic. I'm not educated enough to know whether or not a centralized site is a good plan or not. I think we specifically broke up our downtown shelter and created resource centers for a reason. The bond proposal is not specific to the shelter system, except that additional capacity will help us get people into the resource centers on a shorter term basis, which is always the goal. So it helps it, but it doesn't speak to it directly. So the campus and the need, I think, will largely be defined based on the passage of this bond. And that's where the hard work over that 12-month period to 18-month period needs to occur, regardless of whether or not I have a voice on that board, which I don't. Yeah. And I saw one right here, and then one over here, and we'll be done. Thanks.
Yeah, I have a business in downtown Salt Lake, and we're between the 4th Street Clinic and the Rescue Mission, so we have a nice population of homelessness there. It always harass my customers, and they like to use our property as the bathroom, so on and so forth. And it's always a mental health issue, and you've spoken to, if somebody's having a mental health crisis, they have 48 hours to be detained. My wife works in mental health. She's a therapist. She's worked with solid behavioral health. And once they pass that point, from my understanding, it's voluntary whether they stay or not. And you had talked about being able to escalate them to another facility where they continue to have resources and support. But isn't that a choice for them to go to that, or they can choose to go back to the streets? How do you help them make that decision that's best for them when their current position, they want to stay on the street?
Yeah, so I will say that Kevin Curtis, who's running this for Huntsman Mental Health, is phenomenal. And one of the reasons Salt Lake County actually funded those 12 beds as a bridge program for about 18 months so we could figure this out. I don't know the analysis and the legal and what rights. It depends on the stabilization, that I do know, but I don't know where that line is where they would either voluntarily or be forced to go for additional treatment. But, and there's a lot of energy around this very matter as it relates to the legislature too. But I would look a little more into like the Huntsman Mental Health plans for this, but they're impressive. And so that's the best answer I can give you. Should I take one more? Should we wrap up?
I think we need to cut it off.
Cut it.
We've got a hard stop here.
Okay.
at the facility, so-
Can I take 1 second to wrap up? I just want to say to the business owners here, one of the reasons I'm motivated is I know what you're talking about. I live in Salt Lake City. I enjoy downtown. I've heard heartbreaking stories, and I'm sorry. So please stick with us. I feel really sad when I hear stories that government isn't responding, they don't help. They're just not aware. We are aware, we are doing what we can. These are massive systems, and I get frustrated sometimes because I don't control every lever. I believe this bond is a stabilization we need to, and the housing in the plan that I rolled out, and that it will be game-changing. And you have my commitment, as long as I'm in this office, to work on this every day. So thank you. Thanks for letting me be here. Tiffany, thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, round of applause for the mayor. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Well, thank you again for coming, and we're deeply grateful to the mayor for her significant efforts. Obviously, a lot of time has gone into preparing and presenting this bond to the community, and we hope that this, with other solutions, will be effective. I think the one thing we've all learned over the last several decades is dealing with the issues of homelessness is incredibly complicated, and there's no easy fix. And we continue to work on it. I think there's also a sense that we're still not there yet. There are too many problems that are not fixed, and we hope, as an organization, Solutions Utah, our desire is to have a voice in all of this. We're deeply concerned about making sure public funds are used wisely, that the programs that we invest in as a community are effective in solving the issues that are out there, and that we're not just pouring money into a deep hole, because I think we all know that we've spent lots of money over the last few decades, and sometimes it's hard to see any progress with some of this. So we anticipate things getting better. We think some of the proposals around campuses could be a very effective solution to solving some of this. We'll work with the mayor's office, with the state public homelessness board to try to find those right solutions, and we'll be a voice for accountability and making sure that we're effective in that going forward. We love organizations like the Other Side Academy, and we're excited about what the Other Side Village presents as additional opportunity for more beds for people that are progressing and doing well and willing to be accountable. And our desire is to help those experiencing homelessness to find a better life for themselves. And sometimes that goes beyond choice. It's hard for them to choose that sometimes when they're in the bottom. And we think there are better ways maybe to help them get to a place. And we think some of those organizations will do that very well. One other quick thing that affects, I think, many of you, there is a no trespassing affidavit issue that's kind of circulating out there that Brian Hill knows quite a bit about, and I'm going to have Brian come up and take just a minute and talk about that because we think it can be helpful to you as business owners in the community. So Brian, if you want to take a minute, and following Brian's comments, we'll be adjourned. Thank you for being here. And thanks again to Kiln and to Brian for helping us have this facility. Oh, yeah, I'll let you talk about it.
Oh, I do have validations for anyone that parked in our garage. The first hour is free, but since we've gone over an hour, grab one of these validations. I'll just pass these out. So the no trespassing affidavit, I met with Detective Marie Stewart. One of the things that they're asking businesses to do is to sign. They have an affidavit that they're sending out. They're asking businesses to sign the affidavit and to put no trespassing signs up. The no trespassing sign is basically just indicates that after the hours that the business is no longer operating, that if someone's on the property, that they're considered trespassing. And so, obviously many businesses want to be strategic with where they put this signage. At Gateway, we certainly don't want it on our front door, but we do want to sign the affidavit. We do want to have the signage posted so that if people are found, in our parking lots or just places they shouldn't be after hours, then police can take more steps to be able to trespass them and to keep them from, doing things that are up to criminal mischief. So if you want more information on that, please come see me. I'll get your email, and I'll send you the information on how to obtain the affidavit and the signage.
Okay, thank you all. Validation.